Our next guest is Evie Johnny Ruddy. It's been telling the stories behind Regina buildings and landmarks through audio walking tours. The University of Regina assistant professor and artist has guided people through love stories, a run-in with Bushwhacker's ghost. Can't wait to hear about that. Into a trans woman's fight to change the sex on her driver's license.
Welcome to the Warehouse District. My name is Evie, and for the past several months, I've been walking the streets in this neighborhood, getting to know some of its history and the people who have lived and worked here. Just like its name, this neighborhood is home to many warehouses that were built in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Peer through the windows of 2712 13th Avenue.
Anybody that knew Dad, he loved politics, and he talked about politics and religion.
I'm here in the dining room of 217 Angus Crescent.
Since 2017, I've been talking to other queer, trans, and two-spirit people, asking them to share stories about living here. Out of that came this audio tour. I'm going to take you to 10 stops on this tour.
That was a little bit from each of Evie's audio tours, entertaining the city, Warehouse District, Village Voices, and queering the Queen City. Evie joins me now in studio to explain more. Hello there.
Hello.
So how did you first get into developing and producing these audio tours? And I know we could have played a lot more from that. I was really interested in that. But how did you get into this?
Yeah, so I used to work for CBC Radio, and I often describe the stops on the tour, the stories on the tours, as similar to audio documentaries that you might hear on CBC Radio. After I was working at CBC, I did an artist residency at the Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity in digital narratives. And Jorge Just was there, and he was a former producer of This American Life. And he was working for a company in San Francisco called Detour, and they were making audio walking tours. And what I learned from Jorge was how to tell narrative-driven audio stories that are place-based, about communities. And so then I came back to Regina, and I just happened to be taking on an artist residency with the Cathedral Village Arts Festival. It was their 25th anniversary. And for that residency, I decided to make an audio walking tour of the Cathedral Village. It's called Village Voices. And that was the first one that I made. And the second one that I made, I was contacted by the Warehouse District, and I was hired to make one for them. And then a few years later, a professor at the University of Regina, Dr. Claire Carter, received some funding, and we co-produced Queering the Queen City, which is an audio walking tour of the downtown area and into the Heritage neighborhood. And it really tells stories of everyday queer and trans people in those neighborhoods, positive stories, more challenging stories, community building, and so on.
What kind of research for you goes into this? And you're talking about narrative storytelling, and as a journalist, there's all sorts of things and different ways you can go to tell a story. What sort of research do you do before you get into developing the tour?
So a lot of it starts with word of mouth. I'll hear about an interesting tidbit about a place in a neighborhood, but then I'll have to investigate that and confirm that it's actually true.
So cool.
So, these audio walking tours have taken me to the library, the Henderson's directory to find out. It lists like everyone who resided in a place. I've gone through letters to the editor and quoted some of them from the Leader Post, but the majority of it is talking to people. So for each of the tours, at every site, a member of the community tells a story. So I narrate, as you would have heard in the opening clip there. I narrate all of the tours, but I go out and I interview people, and I audio record those, and then I cut up the interview and I mix it, and then I arrange it. And so there's a lot of design that goes into that. The first tour that I made these isolated audio stories. And then I went out and I tested it, and there wasn't that connective tissue. So I really had to design it in a way that I'm telling people the secrets of the neighborhood, and I welcome them. The first stop is a welcome, and I explain how it works. So how it does work is you download an app called Easy.travel. It's izi.travel. And it's an audio tour app. People from all over the world create the content. And so people will download that, and I'll promote the tour as go to this corner, open the app, and that's the first stop. And I welcome them, I situate them, I explain what they're going to hear, and I make sure that they feel that I'm with them at all the times. So I try to reference things that they might see in the neighborhood so that, there's this like omnipresent Evie Johnny with them.
You're with them the whole time.
Yeah, that I'm with them. And so, and then the app is geolocated. So once they open the app and they start the tour, when they start to approach the next stop, and I give directions for how to get there, but when they start to approach the next stop and they get within the parameters of it, it automatically starts to play the next story.
I was just in Europe and on an audio tour at a castle, and you feel when someone is doing a good job at these, you can feel that you're in the moment. And so you're talking about being in the moment, being there, even though you've recorded something, which is it's a trick. It is a trick of storytelling, narration, which is so cool. What has stood out to you through this experience what have you learned about the city, learned about yourself doing this?
I've learned a lot about the city. One thing that I love about this is I love storytelling. And because it is narrative driven, it's not necessarily about the buildings. It's not necessarily about the physical infrastructure. It's really about the people. And they're not even stories about significant people per se. Like they're not about the lieutenant governors or the former premiers. They're everyday people who live in our neighborhoods. Sometimes I describe it as they're counter narratives. They may not be stories that are part of the dominant narrative of a neighborhood or the dominant narrative of a city. And so what I've learned and what I like to say is that every sidewalk, every parking lot, every park has a story. And so this is just a snippet. These audio tours obviously can't capture all the stories. For the Queering the Queen City audio walking tour, all of the stops on that tour, they're not marked as queer, except for one, the gay bar. And what that tour kind of tries to do is challenge this binary of gay-straight space. So in larger urban centers, we have maybe a gay village or a gayborhood. Regina doesn't have that. And so when we conceive of space as, this is the gay village, then everything inside that space is thought of to be queer or trans, and everything outside of it is then conceived of as straight space. But that's not true. And so it kind of challenges that because there are queer and trans stories all over this city. One of the stops on that tour is a parking lot behind College Avenue campus, and it's about femmes across the board. It's a skate collective, a BIPOC skate collective. And at the time, once a week, they would take over that parking lot. They would skate. People would bring, the night that I joined and recorded audio, people had brought bannock, apples from their tree. I was told that sometimes people bring a guitar, and it's about placemaking, and it's about building community. And that's really cool. And I love those kinds of stories.
You talked about village voices, and everyone, if you're familiar with Regina, the Cathedral Village is one of the standout neighborhoods, and people would associate with that, and that would be some place where you'd be able that's a great place for a walking tour based on the history, and you're talking about the people that have been there. What's a story from your tour there that stands out to you?
From the Cathedral
Yes.
Village Voices? I really love the story about Buy the Book. It's not there anymore. It was a used bookstore. And I think what's there now is what is it, a pottery store,
Okay.
Traditions. Anyway, so the story is a musician is telling the story who played with the Lazy MKs. And it's really about when you would go in to buy the book, if you knew about the secret space in the basement, you had to get an invitation. There was a trap door that led to the basement, and musicians would play there. And a record label, 13th Avenue record label was down there, and they would record albums, and they would have parties till 4 and 5 in the morning. And it's just a story about community, and that they lost that space when the bookstore closed. And I really love that story.
With Evie Johnny already talking about the walking tours, audio tours that you've done here in the city. We talked about Queering the Queen City a bit. We talked about the Cathedral Village, Village Voices. Now you also mentioned entertaining the city in the Warehouse District. Is there something from that tour that you can highlight for people?
Yeah, I have to tell the ghost story.
Yeah, we did tease that, so we need to tell people about that.
So I interviewed Bev Robertson, who opened Bushwhacker. And Bushwhacker is said to be haunted by James Strathdy, who died in 1936. And so we were in the basement of Bushwhacker, and I was asking Bev to tell some stories about how the place is haunted. And so he's talking about how some people have seen beer bottles moving, shaking for no reason, clothes hangers going. And I took the audio home, and I've listened to a lot of audio, right? Because
Yes.
I've done a lot of interviews, and I've never in my life heard anything like this. So I'm transcribing the interview, and all of a sudden I hear this like whisper, and it's like it sounds like that. Like it's not a word. And the hair on my arm stood up, and I was like, oh, did I just hear that? And I played it back, and it was in there while he's talking about a ghost. And I ran downstairs, and I was like, you have to listen to this. And so I ended up working it into the story. But yeah, I don't know if I believed in ghosts before, but I definitely believe in them now.
That's the discovery. It must be so exciting for you as someone who's going out and you're saying you're learning about the city, but you're not typically getting to the characters or the people from history that are familiar to people in Regina. You're kind of opening a door to different stories, new discoveries. What's that like for you as a storyteller to be able to discover something and then have people, they're discovering that with you when they're listening to these audio tours?
Yeah, I mean, it's super fulfilling. I love being emotionally moved by stories, and I like to share that with other people. I really enjoy crafting the story, mixing the audio, and trying to bring it to life with sounds as well. And so it's a joy for me to be able to talk to other people and be able to share their stories with a wide audience. And I also love the aspect of like taking a risk of, putting these stories in an app and trying to communicate to people. You have to make it compelling enough that people are going to want to leave their homes and download this app. And some people have a barrier with technology. You have to try and overcome that. Go to this corner. It's going to be satisfying. You're going to enjoy this. And yeah, I like to see what happens and what comes of it. And I hope that more people learn about these tours and are able to take them in the community. And even sharing feedback is great too. And I'd love to make more.
I mentioned in our last guest, Sarah from Heritage Regina, we talked about this, and it's typically when you go overseas or you go to a new city and you're like, oh, I'm going to go take a tour, or there's a historical building or landmark that I want to learn more about, or historical figure. Do we do enough to promote? I probably already know your answer, but we do enough to promote our own city, our own province, as far as what it has to offer, its history, and the things like what you're doing, what Heritage Regina and others are doing to highlight history and make people proud of the place that they live or they came from.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the audio tours that I do are not only about history as well.
Yes.
But I think we could do a lot more about. I think that the narrative-driven stories on the tours help people connect. Mm-hmm. I mean, like in the Village Voices one, you meet Olga, who bakes the pies at the Mercury, and you learn about a love story that happened at Iannoni's. And I think that helps people understand like who they're building communities with, who's in their neighborhood. It just brings the community alive in a different way that maybe tourism may not, where it's necessarily more about promoting activities. This is about the people. And so I think we could do more to talk about the people in our cities.
You're featuring neighbors. You're not just featuring something from the past or something that happened. Hey, remember when this happened? There is a bit of that, obviously, but you're mentioning, hey, these are people who walk by. And so it can be marketed to people like me that live here, not just someone who's coming in for the summer to come visit and they want to learn more about the city. This is something you can do any day of the year in your backyard, which is very cool.
Yeah, exactly.
What you mentioned wanting to do more. Is there another one on the horizon? There's something you really would like to do in this space?
If I only had more time. time and funding. But I was just at a queer and trans history conference this summer, and there's a lot of interest elsewhere. One of the things, I actually have a meeting in a couple of weeks to talk with someone about potentially partnering to make more tours, but not in this city.
Okay.
One of the other things that I would love to do is teach people how to make these. It's an app that anybody can create content for. And so, yeah, there are these desires, and it's just a matter of finding time and funding to do that.
Evie, Johnny, thanks so much for your time today, and good luck in the future with this and other endeavors. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. That was Evie Johnny Ruddy, an assistant professor in creative technologies and design at the Faculty of Media, Art and Performance at the University of Regina, also an artist. As you just heard, an audio walking tour creator. You can hear or take these tours by, as Evie mentioned, IZI, that's easy.travel, or visiting Tourism Regina's website. And if you'd like a direct link, feel free to email us here at bluesky@cbc.ca.